Hey, what's up everybody? Thanks for tuning into another video. In this one, I want to talk about healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity. Over the past few years, I've heard that term a lot, toxic masculinity. But rarely have I heard any solutions offered, or even if there is such a thing as healthy masculinity. And I think it's important to make a distinction between the two of them and to acknowledge that masculinity in and of itself isn't a negative thing and shouldn't be perceived as one. First, let's take a look at what toxic masculinity actually is. My understanding of it is a set of personality traits portrayed as desirable and strived for by men, but in reality cause damage to those who adopt it, to the people around them, and to society as a whole. Some examples of these traits are lust, greed, anger, indifference, violent dominance, entitlement, isolation, and hyper-competitiveness. From a young age, boys see role models all around them exhibiting these traits, and it's taught to them that this is the proper way to be a man. We see examples of this manliness on TV and in movies, in sports, music, politics, and on the news. And even closer to home, we see it in our schools and from our father figures who in turn saw it from their father figures before them. Let's take a look at what the incubation of these traits results in different aspects of life. Firstly, looking at the personal implications and then working outwards into social circles. A man who takes on toxic traits and personality characteristics may lose their authentic self in the process. Afraid of judgment and rejection from social groups, they will suppress their true wants and desires, their passions and emotions in exchange for their perceived norm. From personal experience, I can tell you that this creates a warped sense of self and a complicated experience of identity. Bad habits are easily formed, such as excessive drinking, drug use, self-hatred, unsafe sexual practices, and social posturing. Unfortunately, many men do not seek counseling or therapy because it is looked at as weak. And these habits become more and more concrete with age and become harder to deal with over time. The end results can range from unrealized potential, rage, sickness, and injury to abuse, criminal activity, death, and suicide. Men, on average, are 4 to 5 times more likely to commit suicide and much more likely still to commit crimes, both violent and property. And crime is just one example of how toxic men can negatively affect others. Let's look at the relationships immediately around an individual. The most obvious we can point to is domestic relationships. Of course, the most extreme negative consequences are domestic abuse, both sexual and physical, and sometimes even murder. But in less extreme examples, we can look at derogatory behavior towards our partners, such as forcing them into gender roles in the household or limiting their social interactions between friends and family. Less insidious, but still a huge issue, is men not taking the time to learn how their partner needs to be loved, by possibly learning their love languages or just listening to them when they express those needs. But instead just default to the standard, work hard, provide for the house, reproduce, and protect the family from outside danger. Needless to say, many romantic relationships could have been saved if the man simply learned to deal with his toxic ways. Moving further outward in the social circles, let's take a look at the man's school, work, and his personal friendships. The distorted image of manliness in modern society has fostered a culture of discrimination towards many other groups. Sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and classism have become normalized in our society and present themselves often in daily life. In school, we see bullying take place at a high rate based on these things. Children are picked on constantly if they allow their differences to show. For example, a boy wearing pink or a boy who loves dramatic theater may be ridiculed by his peers and called things like gay or more harsh slurs, forcing them to hide their identities as defense mechanisms. This experience can stay with bully victims far into adulthood and can result in gay or trans men staying closeted for many years, or straight men acting macho and denying their true personalities in fears of being bullied again, further presenting the model to other men and continuing the vicious cycle. In the workplace, we can see a lot of sexism and racism taking place. First, looking at sexism, there are some obvious things we can look at. Sexual abuse in the workplace by powerful men taking advantage of their position, women not being taken seriously for promotions or not offered certain positions in organizations, and in general, a boys' club environment being created. In terms of racism, we can see unfair hiring practices, unchecked racial humor, and looking at others who are different from us as a threat. This feeling, I believe, comes from the hyper-competitiveness, with the mentality that sticking to people who are on your own team will help you win the game. The last social circle I want to look at is friendship. This is the area where toxic masculinity spreads the most. We all want to fit in, and especially when we're young, we subconsciously mold ourselves to fit in with the rest of the boys. This can take many shapes. Excessive drinking to keep up with the guys, being hyper-aggressive in sports and toughing it out when you're injured to seem strong, taking part in crimes because others are doing them, posturing with expensive things like clothing or cars, sleeping with as many women as possible because it's the cool thing to do. And the list goes on and on and on. It's clear that we affect many more people than just ourselves with our actions, and we need to take responsibility for that. So now that we know what toxic masculinity is and how it affects us and others, let's explore what we can do about it. How can we have healthy masculinity while still being men? Because it's not the masculinity that's the issue, it's how we embody it. To have healthy masculinity is to embody the positive attributes of a man, while not letting ourselves push them to the extreme so they control our actions and our emotions. The toxic traits I mentioned earlier are shadows of the positive ones we should be trying to practice. Instead of lusting after women, spend time learning how to love them. Rather than letting greed rule your decisions, just focus on having ambition and let that drive you towards success. Use the energy it takes to hate and use it for passion. Instead of indifference, try empathy, and instead of dominance, try assertiveness. Understand that you are not entitled to anything and take pride in your hard work and trust that it will get you ahead in life. Stop isolating yourself from others and try being more open and honest with the people around you. And rather than being extremely competitive, learn to just have fun playing the game. To achieve this switch in mentality isn't easy and takes a lot of hard work. In many cases, years of unlearning and rewiring needs to be done. One key aspect to understand is we can learn a lot from the feminine, and that embracing femininity doesn't take over our masculine side, because they are not mutually exclusive and they are both a very important part of the human experience. Speaking to women more openly can be very healthy, but more importantly, giving them the space to speak and for you to actually hear them. But as men, it is even more crucial to talk to each other. There's such a huge stigma about open and honest communication between men, and it's our responsibility to break that cycle of toxicity. We need to trust that we can be honest with each other and hold each other accountable. I challenge every guy out there to sit down with your best male friend and tell them how your toxicity has hurt you and the people around you. And ask them to do the same and challenge each other to call the other one out if you see them slip up. Being vulnerable is scary, but it's so important to do it if we are going to begin to move towards change. Of course, our friends and family aren't necessarily experts, so we need to seek outside help to get the tools that we need to deal with our bad habits. I highly recommend seeking therapy. It's a powerful, safe space to explore every aspect of yourself and gain the knowledge you need to confront yourself head on. At first, it's going to be very hard and uncomfortable, but trust me, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. So invest in yourself, and you and the people around you will be grateful for it. Another piece of advice I can give you is to get out of your comfort zone. Try new things, meet new people, go different places. Try everything that you were afraid of doing in fear of not being a man. Explore your hidden talents, interests, and tastes, and challenge your current ones. You may be surprised at what you find out about yourself. That's it, guys. I hope this was helpful for you. I'd love to hear about your experience in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on this subject? If you're new, please consider subscribing. I post videos every single week on a wide variety of subjects, and I'd love to have you be a part of the conversation. Throw me a like if you enjoyed this video. It would help me out a lot. Thanks for hanging out, you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.